working group meeting. So, so they really want us to see what we can do to make this as smooth of a process as possible. So next slide. So we're going to cover what are the conferences coming up this year, what are the roles for the different points of contacts at the country level, the backstopping level, and for the, I guess, for the BA overall level, the timeline and process for approvals, and some tips for preparing abstracts for PMI review. Next slide. So why should we even bother submitting abstracts to a conference? Well, it makes our project look good. It makes CCP and PMI look good to see, to have our work showcased at these meetings of our peers, especially since a lot of these, are required to have some sort of peer review or scientific basis when it comes to publishing our results. When we raise our profile, we attract donors. We attract collaborators with whom we can work when developing funding proposals or coming up with cool initiatives. We can receive feedback on our work, both positive and negative, and some useful suggestions for things to consider in the future. We can exchange ideas with our peers, broaden our professional networks, and of course, travel and visit new locations. However, preparation is key to getting conference abstracts accepted. Next slide. So here are the conferences that we are basically anticipating in any given year, and PMI approval is required if the activity or trip is PMI funded. ASCMH happens like clockwork every year. The abstracts are announced, the deadlines are announced at the same time every year. The deadlines are around the same time every year, and the meeting itself is at the same time every year. We can count on ASCMH happening through rain or shine, through a pandemic. ASCMH happened on time, always. The RBM SBC Social and Behavior Change Working Group is a group where we have some role in, since we are secretariat for that group, and but we have also. And we have tried very hard to ensure that happens every year. So some years it's been virtual, but it's been happening every year since inception. And the dates for that generally has fluctuated. It has ranged between July and November, and the deadline announcements have also fluctuated. But we know that they happen. Alliance for Malaya Prevention also happens regularly, pretty much every year. It usually happens in the first quarter of each year, so they would normally even be meeting now. But this year it's a little different, and it sounds like they're going to be meeting mid-year. And AMP, also known, which is the acronym for Alliance for Malaria Prevention, has a focus on nets, and they're receptive to SBC abstracts, particularly SBC abstracts related to everything around nets, like whether net care, net repair, net use, or the implementation of the SBC components of net distribution campaigns. And then a group that hasn't been meeting as often, but has been trying to meet more regularly in recent years is the RBM Case Management Working Group. They have been, in the last 2 or 3 years, been meeting every June, but their deadline announcements are pretty short. And yeah, they're trying to get a bit more regular about this. This group tends to have, as an interesting group, because they have a lot of focus on NMCPs. They also attract private sector, diagnostics, research groups, ACT treatment groups, severe malaria groups, and ICCM groups. So this is kind of an interesting conference in that SBC is kind of like nice to know or nice to have, and provider behavior change is kind of more along the lines of their interest if we were to do anything with SBC with this group. But I think there are some interesting connections that could be made there. The Malaria and Pregnancy Working Group is also, I believe, having a meeting this year, and maybe other people can speak to that more. Do other people in this group call know about what the plan is with the MIP working group?
I don't know what the plan is for this year, just to say that they've been very receptive to us in the past. And we've been invited to present at their annual meetings before.
Right. Yeah, and so I'll have to say that there are a number of groups malaria groups that meet regularly, and we can count on them more or less happening every year. There's a range of fora here to present, across all the topics that we cover here at BA. And the challenge here is that the deadline announcements are only a few weeks before the actual abstract deadlines. So if you see here, it ranges between 2 or 4 weeks before to up to 6 to 8 weeks before, which is a tight turnaround time when you consider the long PMI approval process. Next slide. So why is it important to plan now? Preparing to analyze and submit for these conferences only when the deadlines are announced is too late. The abstract development and approval process takes 6 to 8 weeks, but abstract deadlines are usually announced 2 to 6 weeks before the submission deadline. And we are all swamped with our other activities. PMI team members may also be swamped. And on top of that, in addition to their usual workload, they also have the mock visits the first half of each year, which is also conference season. So we have to think, so they really want us to think about how can we streamline their work and make it easier for them to anticipate what's coming down the pipeline so they can manage their workload. And we need to think the same about us so that we can make the most out of these conference opportunities. So some best practices are suggested below. Identify which abstracts you are submitting to which conference ahead of time. I recommend having a general plan of having a plan for the whole year. We know which conferences are happening this year. Work with your team to have the necessary analysis and results available about 2 months before the abstract submission deadline. We generally know when these abstract deadlines are. We just don't know when the abstract announcements are going to come out. And then when it comes to ASTMH symposia, they're a bit tricky because the deadlines are usually in early January or early February when we're all coming back from winter break. So my suggestion is that to get a symposium to ASTMH, start organizing your panel and your co-presenters in late October, early November, basically around the same time ASTMH is happening, and then have a first draft ready for PMI review soon after the new year. That way we're not all caught off guard when the announcements go out in mid-January that, oh, you're supposed to be planning your symposium already. Next slide. So one of the things that we're doing this year is we are now creating a system of focal points for PMI abstracts. Each country will have 2 focal points or point of contact. That's what POC stands for. One is based in country and one is from the US backstopping team. And then there's someone here at the US level who will liaise with the PMI US AOR team to help them anticipate which abstracts are coming through the pipeline and help facilitate the process of facilitate the last 2 or 3 steps of PMI approvals. So that's me this year, and Katie is working closely with me this year. And the idea is that Katie will be taking on this role next year once she's back from maternity leave. The points of contacts are responsible for ensuring abstract quality and obtaining timely approvals. You don't have to be the authors of the abstracts, but it's important that you are aware of the timelines, the deadlines, aware of the process, and aware of what PMI is looking for so that when the abstracts come to you, you can quickly review it and give the authors that feedback and help them anticipate what kind of feedback PMI will have. Okay, next slide. So the submission process takes about 6 to 8 weeks. First, it's important for to declare the country team's intention to submit, discuss with your team whether you're going to submit, to an abstract to X conference, and then inform the mission of your intention and communicate the planned deadlines and inform them that we would like to submit an abstract about our work with community CHWs, and we will send you the draft in 2 weeks. We'll need you to turn it around in a week. Do you think you could do that? That would, having the mission, know what to expect will help us get our feedback in a timely manner. And then the country points of contact will then inform myself and Katie, and then we will then inform the BA PMI AOR team based in the US, how many abstracts are coming. After you've declared your intention to submit, then the teams then develop their abstracts. It's important that the abstract is reviewed for technical quality among us at CCP. It's also important to consider including co-authors from NMCP and PMI. PMI views research, including conference abstracts, as an important opportunity for capacity building. So they really expect us to invite and involve NMCPs to the extent possible. Also, it's important to invite your co-authors to review, and that would include your co-authors with PMI, NMCP, CCP, and other collaborators or partners. Next slide. The third step is to submit the abstract to the mission, to the country mission. The country point of contact does not need to be the person to submit that draft. You can discuss that amongst yourself as a country, but it is your role to ensure that this process happens and that it happens on time. When this draft is submitted to the mission, please do copy the backstopping team for that PMI mission, and you'll see why later on, because later on you'll see that this helps us facilitate and get the headquarters or US level approvals in a more timely manner. In addition, this helps ensure we actually get technical feedback, because even the PMI country teams can be very busy and may not be able to get to the abstract, while the US-based backstopping team may be able to. So as mentioned earlier, inform that you would like to get their draft and be able to revise it in about a week or two. And then once you've gotten their feedback, revise and resubmit it for their approval, for the mission level approval. If your abstract has a CDC co-author, it's important to go through an additional step. And this is where Katie or I would come in. After you've gotten your mission level approval, Katie or I would then submit for CDC review and e-clearance. This process used to take just a week, but now they're telling us for ASME it's closer to a week and a half to 2 weeks. So just be aware. This is a necessary step, but it only applies to abstracts with CDC co-authors. So what this basically entails is that we have to get a concurrent statement from the CDC co-author, and then typically that CDC co-author then goes to forwards the abstract to their own technical clearance team within CDC. So the lift on our end here at BA is pretty light, but we just need to keep in mind this step and the amount of time it takes, and that there are actually usually deadlines for submitting this request. If we are in an absolute time crunch and we don't think we would be able to submit in time to get the CDC review or e-clearance, we could choose to remove the CDC co-author and just acknowledge them in the body of the poster or the presentation itself. And sometimes even the CDC co-authors themselves note that ahead of time and say, hey, why don't you take me off this? Because I don't think you'll get CDC clearance in time. So that can be kind of worked out, behind the scenes with the CDC co-authors. Could be something you could decide at your own discretion as well. Next slide. So now so the country teams at this point have received mission approval. Katie or I, the ones here in the US, have now obtained CDC clearance. Then Katie and I would then forward this to the US AOR team for PMI US technical review. They need at least a week to review this. And the nice thing about the country-based POCs copying the backstopping team is that usually someone on that backstopping team is an SBC person as part of our AOR team. So this actually, by copying them in that earlier step, we can frequently expedite this process, or we can get approval for this level on a fairly quickly. Although I wouldn't say that the rest of the technical team would avoid reviewing. It's just that it's usually at a higher level quality that this review process wouldn't have as many comments. Yes. Thanks, Gabrielle. And then, so after we have received PMI US technical team review, our AORs at PMI would then usually forward that abstract to the PMI policy clearance team. And if they don't do that, we'll just confirm that it's ready for, me and Katie, we'll just confirm with them that it's ready for submission to the PMI policy clearance team. And the role of this policy clearance team is to ensure that the abstract is aligned with PMI branding, marking, and policy or technical guidance, and that PMI authors' affiliations are cited correctly. I wouldn't be surprised if we still get technical comments at this stage, and we often will, but that's just par for the course. And so we just need to anticipate that we're going to get those kinds of comments. Technically, this process takes about 2 or 3 days, and it's a fairly quick turnaround. We finalize and we submit. And then finally, at this stage, we are ready to submit to the conference website. Next step. It's a lot of approvals. It's a lot of back and forth. But the nice thing is that it's a rigorous review process, and it increases the likelihood of our abstracts getting accepted and, frankly, well received within the scientific community. Once we've submitted the conference abstract, our Zoom, that's a very good point. It sounds fairly involved. Yes, but it does help ensure good quality. So once you've submitted the abstract, please do share your final submitted version with all the co-authors. It's a courtesy, yeah, and their names are on it. They should have a copy of what we're telling the scientific community they're accountable for. Next slide. Okay, it is possible to submit the same abstract to additional conference, and I'm pleased to share that getting the approval process is easier. Getting through the approval process is easier. So yes, you can submit the same abstract to ASTMH and the RBM SBC working group and the case management working group and other meetings. If the abstract has received the mission approval, the US PMI technical clearance, the policy clearance, and there have been minimal to no changes, these clearances are not required again. But if it does have a CDC co-author, CDC clearance is needed again. If you are planning to submit the same abstract to an additional conference, we still need to inform, the mission and PMI US of this intention, and just confirm with them that no additional approvals are needed. Okay. Next slide. Tips for getting our abstract through PMI review. This quotation is verbatim from a document that was shared with us last year. it is PMI's expectation that all abstracts and manuscripts produced for our bilateral, non-bilateral. Yes, thank you for that. If it is a malaria project that is, I guess, USAID funded, but not PMI funded, you know, it's a courtesy that we share our intention to submit with the PMI US team as well. If you are supporting a non-BA project that's PMI, the same process applies. This process applies to all PMI projects. And you know, usually people supporting non-BA projects but are supporting bilaterals might also be linked to BA some way. But in any case, if you have any questions about the process, please feel free to contact me and Katie. We're happy to help, you know, review the abstracts as well. I would say your typical expected people to backstop that project would also be the point of contacts for that abstract submission process. Okay, so PMI expects very high quality abstracts and manuscripts. This means that the content in our abstracts are grounded in best practices. You can refer to the PMI technical guidance for some examples of what they think is good technical practice. It needs to be appropriately cited. We should use published work like the World Malaria Report, the Malaria Indicator Survey, Demographic Health Surveys, journal articles. There are no spelling or grammatical errors. It reads and flows logically, it's concise, and there's minimal SPC jargon. Remember, a lot of the reviewers are not SPC experts, and that goes for the same for the conference organizers. A lot of their reviewers may not be SPC experts either. So we need to think about how can we make our work like sound scientific, but also accessible to people who are not immersed in SPC every day like we are. Next slide. It needs to be methodically sound. If you are, for example, some examples of that could be like mention a theoretical basis for the design of the research or the program, ensure that appropriate data collection and analysis methods were used, mention the frequency and channels used, such as to help us understand the intensity and the breadth of the program. The conclusions in the abstract should be supported by data. I know we get excited about our work, but we should be careful not to over-exaggerate. Science and breakthroughs are done in incrementally, and nobody's expecting world-changing evidence right away. If you're evaluating an SBC program, provide data on the reach, the ideational, psychosocial outcomes, behavioral outcomes, provide comparisons such as trends over time or control group, provide measures of association and statistical significance. Next slide. And finally, PMI checks to ensure that we're using the appropriate language for the author's affiliations. So you see on the slide, you should be using these affiliation language for the different co-authors, depending on whether there are USAID PMI staff, a CDC PMI staff, whether that person is based in the US, whether they're based in the country. And also take note that BA project staff are required to use certain language as well in our affiliations, in the co-author affiliations, like use the project name, the institution, the city and country. We say PMI breakthrough action. Oh, okay, we don't use PMI BA. Okay, I know other projects have been using it, so great. I can edit that. So say the Breakthrough Action Project, Johns Hopkins University, Center for Communications program, and where you're located. So if you're in the US, or Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, etc. Next slide. You've already seen this, but if you haven't, just a quick note that we've all been communicating already about to confirm whether countries are planning to submit. Note that first drafts of abstracts are due to share with your PA and CCPA colleagues, and as well as me and Katie, by February 16 if you have a CDC co-author, and February 23 if you don't have a CDC co-author. And with the intention that we'll have a first draft to share with admissions and their backstopping team and NMCP by March 2nd if you don't have a CDC co-author, and by February 23 if you do. And then we'll submit everything for PMI US technical review. And if the PMI US team, really wants as much as possible for us to be able to submit one batch of abstracts from all of BA by opening of business March 10. And then once we get that level of clearance, we'll then revise and resubmit for the final stage of clearance, policy clearance, by the opening of business March 20. And then the ASTMH submission deadline on their conference portal is March 22nd. Next slide. So we're right in the middle of ASTMH season, but the RBM SBC working group annual meeting is coming up soon. The announcements are expected in early April. The deadline is expected to be in late May. These are not confirmed dates, but they're expected tentative dates. Is your data ready? Do you have data points from your country programs to show results so that you can have abstracts ready for these for the PMI approval process, which would then kick off in early April, around the same time the announcements are expected to happen. As mentioned earlier, preparing your data and analyzing your data, in early April or after the abstract announcements are made is a little late. So, as much as you can, try to have your data ready because we know when these deadlines are. Next slide. So the timeline and the abstract quality checklist can be found online through this link that I've shared with you earlier in the on the sort of POC emails, and you can also find it here on this slide. Next slide. And then finally, I'm sharing this sort of table that we put together for Nigeria, where we kind of started planning out the abstracts we're submitting this year. And it's just a simple matrix. What's the idea? What conference do you think you're going to submit it to? What are, bullet out some key results that you think you would like to present at this conference, and then what are the next steps? And that's about it. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Hi guys, not a question, just a comment to thank you for putting this all together and setting up our teams for success on this. This is an area that PMI has come to us and has asked us to improve on, to do a better job of being coordinated and organized in this work. So this is our collective response to that request, and I am absolutely positive that with this support and going through this process, not only will we have really great abstracts, as Angela's saying, but we will also really strengthen our relationships with PMI at all levels, because when we help them submit things to their leadership on time, it makes them look good as well and makes them feel less stressed out. And that certainly is good for all of us, at the end of the day, when it comes down to our relationships and and maintaining, you know, kind of a positive feeling with them. So I just wanted to make the, you know, that plug as kind of another rationale behind all of this work to help keep us motivated as we go through the splitting atoms, as Arzu mentioned. It may feel like a lot, but it really will go a long way to building strong relationships as well as really great abstracts. So so thanks in advance for everybody's work on the abstract process, and thanks to Katie and Angela for organizing it for us this year.
Well said, Gabrielle. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Oh, I see Anna and Ashley. Maybe Anna first and then Ashley.
No, I was just echoing what Gabrielle was saying. Well done. And yes, it does feel like a lot, but step by step, it's not too bad.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Thanks, Ashley. Yes, I see your comment there. Yes, it's not terrible. It's not terrible. If once you know what PMI is looking for, we can get through this process very quickly. And once they understand that you understand the process, and that you know that you will be helping them, you know, get through their own requirements, it'll really make for a much easier and straightforward relationship and overall experience for everyone. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Good luck with preparing your conference abstracts. And yeah, we look forward to seeing what you have. Take care.
Thanks, Angela.
Thanks, Angela.
Thank you. Good luck, everybody.